My experience happened in July of 1987. I had about a 3-hour missing time in which later, under hypnosis, I relived the most unusual night of my life. As you can see from drawing number 1, I did not go willingly to the craft. 2 small aliens dragged me by the 2 arms on my back to the craft after they rendered me unconscious. The next thing I remember is waking up on a table inside some type of small craft. A guide greeted me and gave me something to drink. I now believe that it was a stimulant of some kind, because I was not sleepy after I drank the substance. I was taken out of the craft, and when I looked around, I noticed I was standing on top of a hill. It was dark, but I saw a faint light near a cavern. We walked up to this area, and it is then that I saw a man dressed in a red military-type jumpsuit, like a pilot would wear. My guide seemed to know this man as he greeted him as we came closer. I also noticed he wore some type of patch and was carrying an automatic weapon. When we walked into the tunnel, I realized we were going right into the side of a large hill or mountain. There we were met with another guard in red, and I saw a computerized checkpoint with 2 cameras on each side. To my left was a large groove where a small transit vehicle carried you further inside. To my right, it looked like a long hallway where there were many offices. We took the transit car and went for what seemed to be a very long time to another secured area. It was then that I was told to step onto some type of scale-like device that faced a computer screen. I saw lights flashing and numbers computing, and then a card was issued with holes punched into it. I would later realize it was used as identification inside a computer. I asked my guide where we were going and why. He didn't say too much the whole time, except that he was going to show me some things that I need to know for future reference. He told me that we had just entered level 1 of the facility. I asked what kind of facility it was, and he did not answer. The story is so very long and detailed, and I hope to write more about it, so I will highlight some of the things I saw, and then compare them with what Judy Doherty and Myrna Hansen saw. I was taken to a huge-looking elevator that had no door. It was like a very large dumb waiter. It took us down to level 2, where there were 2 guards in a different colour of jumpsuit, and I had to go through the same procedure as I did on level 1. This time I was taken down a large hall and saw many offices that had computers that lined the wall. As we walked by, I noticed the lighting was strange, in that I could not see a source for it. Other people walked by and never once acted like I was a stranger. I felt I was in a huge office building where there are many employees with many offices and cubicles. I then saw an extremely large area which looked like a giant factory. There were small alien-type craft parked at the sides. Some were being worked on underneath, and it was then that I saw my first grey-type alien. They seemed to be doing the menial jobs, and never once did they look up as we passed. There were cameras posted everywhere. Then we arrived at another elevator and went down to level 5. It was then that I felt a sense of extreme fear and balked. My guide explained that as long as I was with him, that I would not be harmed. So we got off, and I saw guards posted there at the checkpoint. This time they were not friendly, and they were issuing orders right and left. I noticed that 2 of the guards seemed to be arguing about something, and they kept looking over at me. I wanted to find the closest exit out of this place, but I knew I had come too far for that. This time I was asked to change clothes. I was told to put on what looked to me like a hospital gown, only thank God it had a back to it. I did as I was told, because I didn't want to cause any trouble. I stepped onto this scale-like device, and suddenly the screen lighted up, and I heard strange tones and frequencies that made my ears hurt. What I really thought was strange is that these guards saluted the guide I was with, although he was not wearing any military clothes. He was dressed in a dark green jumpsuit, but it had no insignia that I know of. He told me to follow him down the corridor. As I passed the guard station, I noticed the humming of those cameras as they watched my every move. I was taken down another hall, and it was then that I smelled this horrid smell. Contrary to Judy and Myrna's stories, I knew what I was smelling, or at least I thought I knew. It smelt like formaldehyde. Because of my medical background, I felt probably more comfortable with this situation because I had gone through it so many times before. We came to a large room and I stopped to look inside. I saw these huge tanks with computerized gauges hooked up to them and a huge arm-like device that extended from the top of some tubing down into the tanks. The tanks were about 4 feet tall, so standing where I was, I could not see inside them. I did notice a humming sound, and it looked as if something was being stirred inside the tanks. I started to walk closer to the tanks, and it was at that time that my guide grabbed my arm and pulled me roughly out into the hall. He told me that it wasn't necessary to see the contents of the tanks, that it would only complicate matters. So we went on down the hallway, and then he guided my arm into a large laboratory. I was so amazed because I had worked in one before, and I was seeing machines that I had never seen before. It was then that I turned and saw a small grey being, with his back turned, doing something at the counter. I heard the clinking of metal against metal. I had only heard this when I was preparing my surgical instruments for my doctor in surgery. Then my guide asked me to go and sit down on the table in the middle of the room. I told him that I wouldn't do it, and he said that it would be so much easier if I would comply. He was not smiling, and I was scared. I did not want to be left in this room with this grey alien. About the time I was thinking this, a human man entered. He was dressed like a doctor, with a white lab coat on and the same type of badge I was issued. My guide went to greet him, and they shook hands. I began shaking, and I was cold. The temperature seemed awfully cold. My guide smiled at me and told me he would be waiting outside and I would only be there for a few minutes. I began to cry. I cry when I get scared. The grey alien looked at me and turned around to continue what he was doing. The doctor called for more assistance, and it was then that one other grey alien came in. The next thing I knew, I was very drowsy. I knew I was being examined internally, and when I lifted my head, I saw this horrid grey alien glaring at me with his large black eyes. It was then I felt a stabbing pain. I screamed, and then the human doctor stood next to me and rubbed something over my stomach. It was cold. The pain immediately subsided. I could not believe this was happening to me all over again. I begged for them to let me go, but they just kept on working very fast. After they were finished, I was told to get up and go to this small room and change back into my other clothes. I noticed blood, as if I had started my period. But as I continued to get dressed, and when I came out, I saw my guide speaking to the doctor in the corner of the room. I just stood there, helpless. I felt more alone then than I ever had in my life. I felt like a guinea pig. After we left the laboratory, I was silent. I was angry at him for allowing this to happen to me again, but he said it was necessary, told me to forget. I saw more aliens pass us in the hall. Again, it is as if I was a ghost. I asked my guide to please explain this place to me. He told me it was a very sensitive place and I would be brought back again in the next few years. I asked where I was, and he told me I could not be told for my own safety. We then got into the small transit car, and it took us to the other side. It was there that I saw the most disturbing things of all. Unlike the other two women who saw cows being mutilated, I saw what looked to me to be people of all different types standing up against the wall inside a clear casing-like chamber. I went close, and it looked as if they were figures. I could not understand what I was seeing. I also saw animals in cages. They were alive. This was more disturbing to me than seeing the humans in the chambers. I saw tubes extending from the humans and the animals. I saw what looked to be technicians working. They never turned around and smiled or acknowledged my presence. I thought this was very strange. They looked like mindless robots doing a boring job in some dark, forbidding mountain facility. I realized this place was not just run by aliens, but by some form of the military also. Security was high. It became almost impossible to try to get to the next level. Again, there was an argument for the guards. For some reason, I felt they did not feel I belonged there. They were right. We were not allowed to passage to level 6. I asked what was down there and was told that he wanted me to see a certain file and some photographs. He said that many of the employees have their living quarters there, and I was told that this level contained certain experiments that had gone bad, so to speak, and it would be upsetting and not comprehensible to me at this time. It was then that he guided me to the elevator, and we started our climb up to level 1. When we finally got out to the outside entrance, it was still dark, so I know that I had not been gone too long. In fact, I felt I was right near the craft, north of Tucson, where I had been initially taken. I was very wrong. I was taken to the same craft, and this time I remember the feeling of leaving the area. The craft went straight up, and it seemed like forever, but I then began to feel a descent. I was strapped into a seat all the time, so I did not see out. I was taken down to the ground through some type of beam. I felt like I was floating. I saw my aunt's car in the distance down the hill. I walked to the car and drove many miles back to Tucson. I still was in my dirty nightshirt that I had worn when I was summoned to get into the car, and immediately drove to the designated area. In the morning, my friend, Barbara Coventry, saw the huge scratches on my back, and it was then that I knew that something very strange had happened to me the night before. But I did not know what it was. My memory had been blocked. Correlations of Judy Doherty and Myrna Hansen's abductions. All three of us were taken to some type of laboratory underground and examined. All three of us experienced the same type of smells in this place. Judy Doherty and I saw cameras. Myrna Hansen and I both experienced a dampness in the genital area after our examination. All three of us described the same type of tanks with something in them. Myrna Hansen and I felt that something inside the tanks was circulating or being stirred. All three of us felt like we were part of some type of experiment. Myrna Hansen and I felt we were taken on elevators. Myrna Hansen and I felt we were taken to a base of operations or a core of activity. Myrna Hansen and I both saw military wear with patches worn on the shoulder. Myrna Hansen and I both went through tunnels and saw machinery. All three of us felt something was done to erase our memory of what we experienced. Myrna and Judy saw animal parts and cows being dissected. I saw animals in a lab and what looked to be bodies in the clear casings. Myrna Hansen and I both had abdominal scars which interested the aliens. Myrna Hansen and I both had something stuck in our left ear. Myrna Hansen and I both walked past huge rooms. Myrna Hansen and I were both asked to remove our clothes before examinations. Judy Doherty and I saw the same type of swivel chairs and built-in tables. Judy Doherty and I both saw tubes with liquid going elsewhere. Although all three of us found out some information, Judy found out some very startling things. The aliens told Judy that our soil is contaminated and soon the poison will be found in human excretions. Speaking of poisoning, they told Judy it will appear shortly and humans will be affected. It will show up in a laboratory and the sickness will break out and a large number of people will be affected. They saw this would be a warning, and when it happens there will need to be a cleansing process. Whatever is found will be isolated by doctors in a lab and there will be a cure. This sounds so very much like the AIDS epidemic that hit several years ago. Judy would have had no way of knowing about AIDS in 1973. Maybe this is a warning. Maybe we should hear the aliens out. In the Nevada Aerial Research newsletter, I sketched some containers that reminded me of incubators. I saw little beings lying inside them. After being regressed by Bud Hopkins in 1987, I was able to sketch the room with the many incubators in it. I saw a woman with black hair who urged me not to go close to the incubators. It was then that she introduced me to another hybrid child of mine who looked to be around 3 to 4 years old. I was told that there was a different donor for this child. I was told that I could name her and also that I would be seeing her again. When I did, she looked to be around 16 years old. I called her Lyra, and she was told that she would never be able to adapt to Earth as it is now. The child had been raised around a non-violent surrounding, and I was told that it would surely be her death if she was to stay with me. I asked how a child of 4 years old in 1987 could grow and look as she does now. The alien hybrid Maijan tried to explain that their medical and scientific advancements from the past few hundred years enabled them to genetically accelerate the process of growth in just a matter of a few months and years in our time. I asked how this could be done, and he explained that there is a chemical that can be given to a fetus that stimulates the growth hormone, much like our pituitary gland. He told me that in time our scientists would be able to manipulate the gland by stimulating it with this certain chemical hormone. I asked if our doctors are aware of this process already, and he said yes. He told me that it had already been performed on animals in laboratories successfully, but that they have been unable to successfully triumph with this process with human beings. He said that the few that were used in our own government experiments soon died. They became deformed and very ill. That was all that was explained to me at that time. Tucson, July 1987. Christa had driven to the north side of the Catalina Mountains. She encountered a craft and was approached by its occupants. She resisted and was physically pulled across rocky ground, damaging the nightshirt she was wearing and leaving scratches on her back. A woman friend staying with her in Tucson would later photograph the scratches. Also, she had locked the car door, but the aliens opened it anyway. There is little recall at present about what occurred on the craft, except there was some discussion about emotions, hormones, and a chemical imbalance in the brain, plus something was done to her eyes. The aliens revealed to her that her daughter, too, had been abducted. She would later come to her mother with a dream of such an event. Shortly after this Tucson abduction, it was revealed to Christa, and not by aliens, that US government agents witnessed and photographed the incident.